increase in the minimum wage are the people who make just a little bit above where that level would be now because they fear all these new people getting to their state, right? So it's almost like that I'm cool with the rise of minimum wage, but wait a minute, now you're making me part of the bottom, and I don't like that very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hear these questions, well, am I going to get a raise too then? Because even though I wasn't starving, I still have to feel like I got this much more than the people below me. It's the idea that the hierarchy shouldn't move. So people kind of hold these two competing thoughts. Like, yes, nobody, we don't want anyone to starve, but also I always want to see myself as doing this much better than the people who've always been below me. And that's really harmful, especially in, this kind of closed system where we say there is this much money to go around, this much resources to go around. Then you're always viewing the rise of others if it doesn't immediately keep you above them at the same level as a threat.
You also talk about how this is unhealthy for white males.
Yes, absolutely. It is incredibly unhealthy. I mean, to wake up in the morning and not know if you're successful until you can measure how the people supposedly below you are doing means that you don't actually have an inherent sense of self-worth. And it also cuts you off from connection. You can't connect with people if you're constantly measuring how much power you have over them or how much better you're doing than them. If success is only comparative, if self-worth is only comparative, then you're lacking that real inherent sense of self-worth. But also, because the story of this country, which is a lie, is that if you work hard, you will get ahead. And you were meant to get ahead. And this is a story that white men are able to, believe in more than anyone else, right? As a Black woman, the story told to me was not if you work hard, you'll get ahead. It's you have to work hard because otherwise you'll die in the street. But maybe, you might make it. If you work extra hard, you might be okay. But for many white men, the thought is, of course, you do good, you'll get good. It'll be great. So then what happens when it's not? Either something is wrong with you or somebody stole from you. And so we see this split, right? We see the violence. We see Charlottesville. We see this outward violence of people that white men are thinking stole from them. And then we see the internal violence, the rage, the suicide of people who believe I must be broken. And instead of looking at the system and saying the system's broken, it's something's wrong with me.
I can see a viewer watching this segment and saying, okay, what's a white guy to do? I'm stuck here. I have no intentional racism in my body. I don't want to be better than. I'm not trying to be this person, but I'm clearly profiting and benefiting from the system. What step can I take to help?
One of the things that I think is really important to recognize is systems of oppression don't only oppress people of color, they also give power to people who weren't oppressed by those particular systems. So recognize where your power is. Don't let the guilt stop you from actually engaging that power, because we don't have that power, right? So saying, yeah, it sucks that politicians are gonna listen to me and not you, so I'm gonna disengage from politics. No, it means talk to those politicians, right? It means if you're in a work meeting and people listen to you and they'll talk over you, but they'll talk over women and people of color, well, then use that voice to up and hand time to women and people of color and support what they were trying to say before they got talked over. It's about utilizing that power. So whether that's power you have in your school system with the money you spend, whether it's the influence you have with your white peers to look at local issues, use it, engage it, get past feeling like, oh, it's bad, so I'm going to engage. And I hear this from a lot of white men going, yeah, white men suck. I don't want to be a part of it. No, be a part of it and make it better. Engage with it and say, no one's going to hear you. If you're someone that people feel are less than them. So if you're a white man and you hate the way white manhood looks, know that no one's going to listen to me the way they'll listen to you. That you actually own this and you can engage with it and make it better. So start looking at your power for opportunities to create real change.
Well, what about white men who don't have any power or don't feel like they have any power? Because what you're saying is inherently you do.
Yeah, well, and you have some. And I will say, it's important to recognize that there is less power for the average person than a lot of people think there is, but you have some. You have that relative power. That's why often white men are clinging to the status. That's a bit of power that they have they don't want to give up. Use that power. So a lot of that is about educating yourself. So what I recommend often to white men is look at what's happening in your city, in your town. So start saying, what are the graduation rates and the testing rates by race in my schools? What are how are women doing in STEM? What are the sexual assault rates in my area? Right? Start looking at look at who's representing you in office. Look at where you're spending money. And say, okay, this is where I have some power. I can be heard here.
In the wake of your last book, you want to talk about race, and in the speaking engagements and the columns you've been writing, you've personally been attacked in ways that I think most of our audience would find reprehensible. Tell us, what does it mean to be doxxed? What does it mean to be swatted?
Yeah, we were actually just doxxed again a little over a week ago. But doxing is where you put someone's personal information out on the internet so that people who do not like you can harass you. And often nowadays, for me, it's not only been me, my family, anybody associated with me. My mom is currently getting harassing messages on her phone about me. People, wishing horrible things to happen to me. And so that's doxing, and it kind of creates this general feeling of unsafety. It causes harassment. I've changed my phone number multiple times. And then swatting is an offshoot of doxing, where once you have someone's address, you spoof a phone number from where they live, and you call the police and you make some sort of a threat. And the goal is to send a SWAT team into their house, to have someone, guns out, knock the door in. People have been killed from this because someone unsuspecting doesn't understand why a cop's banging their door and reaches for a phone. People think it's a gun. So last year, our home was swatted. I was actually out of town, so my 17-year-old son was asleep alone, and I got a call saying there was a report of shots fired in my home. And it was someone pretending to be my son, saying that he had murdered his parents, and the goal was to actually target my son and send SWAT teams in the house. Luckily, I knew that we were at risk because I knew we had been doxxed. So at least they called me and told me they were going before 6 officers with guns showed up, and 6 officers with guns did show up and pull my son out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning. But if nobody broke the door down, they at least knew there was a chance that everything was going to be okay, because I got to talk to them. But I was literally across the country trying to board a plane home and wondering if my son was going to get shot. And from then on, it was regular, terrorism at our home. And the goal is to create violence and to use this against Black people, to utilize police violence against Black people. That is the goal of this technique. And so it was very painful and scary. It is something that many Black journalists face. It's also something that regular activists of color face all of the time. It's pretty widespread, and police in most jurisdictions don't actually have a good response to it. So yeah, that's the terrorism kind of you face for being a Black woman in this country who speaks out and takes up space that people believe you shouldn't have.
Going into this new administration, what are you watching out for? What are you hopeful for?
I am not naive enough to say this is going to be a revolutionary administration that's suddenly going to be, embracing the language of Black activists across the country. But I do hope to have a little more space to work within. When we are out doing our protests, to be heard a little bit more, to be able to maneuver a little bit more. That is my hope, that maybe we will have that grace, and instead of, working with an administration that was actively trying to make it, against the law to do the work that we've been doing, and instead to be able to operate it. The work remains the same. It's just how hard is it to accomplish these goals, and I'm hoping it will be a little bit easier.
Njima Oluo, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.